We're happy. Okay, great. So welcome everyone. It's 7:04. We're going to begin the SCREE meeting of February 2022. And we're so pleased to welcome Sandra Lobo, who's the Executive Director at Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. I know it's a frequent topic of conversation that people have regularly referenced the work that her organization does. And so we're really excited that she's here tonight, and certainly excited to hear about the platform that your organization works on, and how we can be partnering more and learning more about her organization. So Sandra, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation. I have a presentation, and I apologize, it actually doesn't include the platform, but I will talk about it. Margaret, thank you for raising it. I recycled one that I have had that speaks a little bit about our organization, and I hope this can be a conversation. So at any moment, please just interrupt me. I hope this is more of a back and forth than just sharing our work. So thank you again. So Northwest Bronx, as many of you might know, is a 47-year-old, what we call ourselves as a grassroots member-led organization. We started in 1974 in response to redlining and disinvestment and the fires in the Bronx. And we have been organizing around housing and community development since then, as well as a variety of other issues, which I'll talk about this evening. But we believe that those most impacted by issues should be at the center of decision-making. And so for us, if we're working on housing issues, we want tenants who are impacted by those housing issues to be at the center of the campaign. If we're talking about health, we want folks who are impacted by the health system to be leading those campaigns. So that's a little bit about our foundation. So we organize around 7 different areas of our organization. And as I mentioned, housing is probably it's our bread and butter. We started organizing around the 70s around this issue. And today it still is very much an important issue to us. So we provide education and legal services to tenants, really like the understanding, getting connected to lawyers to understand any issues that they might be experiencing in their buildings. Helping them to understand how to navigate the housing system. We do a lot of tenant rights work and tenant association building. And so for us, we do a lot of outreach every month. Our organizers go out and they door knock on 30 buildings a month. And that is really to door knock and understand what is happening in these buildings, what are the issues that tenants are facing. If there is interest and issues that need to be addressed, we have organizers that work with the tenants in those buildings to form a tenant association to help them understand what their rights are as tenants, to understand the resources that exist to support them, to address those issues, and if necessary, connect them to legal resources and or to build an organizing campaign to win the material changes that they're wishing to address. We also organize around larger systemic issues, right? So the building-wide work that we do is to address immediate issues, but then to connect people to the larger systemic issues. So we are organizing around city level policy changes, as well as state and national policy changes. I won't have time this evening to go in the details of it, but we are on the steering committee of the Housing Justice for All statewide campaign, as well as the Right to Counsel statewide campaign, which has won in the last several years protections for rent stabilized tenants throughout the state. We organize around education. So we do a lot of youth organizing. So really supporting young people to address the issues that they're experiencing in schools. More recently, it's been focused around the school to prison pipeline. So young people telling us that actually the security guards in their buildings cause more harm than good, that they harass the students, that they instigate fights instead of de-escalating them, that there are punitive measures within these schools that push out young people. And so the organizing that we do with young people is to address school-wide issues, like in their particular school, but it also is to address city and state and national policy as well. And so an example of this is that on the state level, we're pushing for solutions, not suspensions bills, which right now you can suspend a kindergartner through third grader for up to 120 days for acting out in class. We believe this is unacceptable and that a kindergartner being suspended for 190 days for acting out in class is not acceptable, and actually begins to push young people out of the classroom and into incarceration. Many of you might have remembered a number of years ago that happened. I actually don't know if it was in Community Board 8. I think it was in Community Board 6, where a second grader was handcuffed to a radiator for having a temper tantrum, right? And so for us, the organizing campaigns that the young people are organizing around is to stop those kinds of responses to issues that young people are experiencing in the classroom. In addition, our organization provides academic support. So we know that our schools have a gap in providing these kinds of resources to young people. We spend more money right now on metal detectors and police in schools than we do with guidance counselors and social workers. And so we provide college prep training and workshops, college essay workshops, et cetera, as well as tutoring for academics. Health is a major campaign that we have been working on for many, many years. You all, not a surprise to you, right? The Bronx is number 62 out of 62 counties in the state with the worst health outcomes. We use a social determinants of health lens, which for us means that we are often socialized to believe that we have poor health because we don't eat right or because we don't exercise, but we often are not taught how systemically the systems can influence our health outcomes as well. We know this because we can determine what our health outcomes will be based on the zip code that we live in. And so for us, health does not mean just eating healthy and exercising. It also means you don't have violence in your community. It also means that you don't have asthma triggers in your building. It means that you have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So that is something that we run these trainings every month, and we tie them into some of the other organizing campaigns that we work on. In addition, we have been organizing around the New York Health Act for many years. It's a state bill. This past year, we have recruited, and we're really excited about it, 4 additional organizations across the state to join this coalition. It's called the Coalition for Campaign for New York Health. And that has also added 2 additional bills that we think are really, really critical. In addition to the New York Health Act, which would provide equal health care, health insurance to everyone, just whether or not you are employed or not employed, whether or not you are documented or undocumented. We have added the expansion of the Medicare bill, which would provide current Medicaid to undocumented folks. And we're trying to push the medical debt bill, which even if the New York Health Act passed tomorrow, folks, especially in the middle, who are not eligible for Medicaid, but their insurance doesn't cover their needs, end up often owing in the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands in medical debt, and that would not eradicate that. So we know that there's many ways to address the health outcomes and the overall health of residents in our borough. Community development is an area that we launched about 3 years ago. So it's a bit new in the sense that our organization has been organizing around housing for, almost 5 decades. And at the end of the day, because tenants do not own or have any decision-making around their homes, the issues are just recycled. We have now done an analysis that there are buildings that we are currently organizing in now that we organized 10 years ago, that we organized 5 years ago, that we organized 15 years ago, right? So there's the landlords often sell buildings to other portfolios, and the same actions repeat themselves. And one way to end this cycle is by supporting tenants to own their own buildings. So the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act and the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, the former is on the state level and the latter is on the city level. These are pieces of legislation that would support residents being in the position and having the resources and the technical assistance to pursue purchasing their own buildings. We incorporated a community land trust in February of 2020. It's a very interesting time to incorporate right before the pandemic hit. And community land trusts are, it's a 501c3, a separate entity that becomes the steward of land. And so it doesn't necessarily own what goes on top of the land, but it stewards the land underneath whatever is built on top. And its mission is to preserve that land for community benefit. So it's not to increase, selling to the highest bidder to make the most profit. It's actually to ensure that there's affordability and sustainability of whatever goes on top of that land. And then finally, to complement that, we have a public land campaign. Many of the sites actually are in Community Board 8, where we have identified publicly owned land that the city is actually just giving away to developers for the highest bid. And instead of engaging community members around what could this land, how can it benefit community, and how might it serve a need or a deficit in that community. And so we've been organizing around public land for the last about 14 months and have been engaged now with HPD and with a set of developers to put pressure for that public land to not be in the hands of especially developers that have a poor track record of violations for the tenants that they manage, but rather in the hands of affordable housing developers and or to be put in community land trusts. We've been organizing around economic development for many, many years. We believe that our small businesses are really at the center of supporting community on many levels, that they not just serve retail or services needs, but they also often provide a wide-ranging network of support for community residents. And so we have supported small businesses to get training, to access a variety of resources, to make referrals. We led during the pandemic a series of workshops to support small businesses to access PPP loans. We actually did a study commissioned by CB7 to interview businesses in their district to understand what the needs of those businesses were. And that's led to providing PPP application trainings for small businesses. We've also organized the Kingsbridge Merchant Association to support them to access small grants and to provide them with support. During the pandemic, we helped construct the outdoor spaces of 9 restaurants in our area to support folks to understand the ever-changing guidelines. That first year, I don't know if you'll remember, but there was changing guidelines every 6 months. There was a new requirement, which is a big cost for small businesses, but also would result in fines if they weren't corresponding with those guidelines. And so we worked with a whole host of architects and planners that were helping us support small businesses in navigating those guidelines and supporting them to be up and running in order to address, the void that was there for them. We have been organizing around public housing now for about 6 years. Many of public housing residents are often left out of a lot of the housing organizing that we do around rent stabilization. And so we've been working with a set of public housing developments to address many of the capital needs that they have, and have won some major capital improvements for many of them, and have been supporting many additional developments to understand and to be engaged in both the PACT and RAD processes, so that community residents understand what's going on and have a say in what's going on in their development. And an add-on to this was the Kingsbridge Armory campaign. If you haven't already heard, it's very sad news to share with you all. The Kingsbridge Armory campaign is no longer. As of December 21st, 2021, the EDC has terminated the agreement with the Kingsbridge National Ice Center for failing to meet the financial requirements of their first phase. And so that was really sad, because as some of you might know, we negotiated a precedent-setting, legally binding community benefits agreement. And so we will be relaunching this campaign, sadly, at our annual meeting coming up on February 12th. So if you all are interested in being a part of that process, I have some details at the end and would welcome you all to be a part of that. But we believe that economic development should be grounded in community. And so it does not mean we need an outside developer to come in to bring in investment. We actually believe that community can be a driver to create an economic engine and anchor. And the Kingsbridge Armory is an example of that, that we hope to pursue in the months ahead. The last area that I'll share is the Voter Power Committee. And this is really a committee that was started about 4 years ago. And it was really in response to so many of our members who felt really disillusioned by the electoral process and felt like their vote didn't have an effect, or didn't understand, how any of the candidates were different, and really wanted support around that. And so we began to host workshops to help people register to vote, to help understand the electoral process, where they can participate. As you all know, ranked choice voting came out for the first time in the city last year, and we ran about 3 dozen ranked choice voting trainings last year across the Bronx, not just in the Northwest Bronx, and worked with organizations across the Bronx to do that. We've given and hosted opportunities for residents to influence the redistricting process that you might know is happening right now, and have been supporting participatory budgeting efforts as well. Connected to this is we've hosted candidate forums. They're nonpartisan candidate forums across the Bronx to ensure that residents have an opportunity to ask questions, to understand where candidates stand on issues that are important to them. And we will continue to do this coming year around the 2022 state elections. And I guess here as well, I'll mention, and thank you, Margaret, for raising it, is the Northwest Bronx has been working with a whole host of organizations across the Bronx, labor, faith-based institutions, and community-based organizations, to create Bronx-wide platforms that are reflective of different areas of opportunity that we believe should be shaped by community residents. And so we started our very first one. It was a federal level platform in 2019 to help influence the conversation and the candidate forums that were happening around the 15th congressional district. Last year, we held about 16 candidate forums across the Bronx to provide opportunities for city council races for residents to understand what's going on there, and use those city level platform to influence the questions that were being asked. And then this year we are finalizing what we're calling a state level agenda. We're calling it an agenda instead of a platform because the Bronx-wide coalition has decided that the platforms are great. They're visionary. We're kind of putting out like what we hope the changes will be in each system, but actually we can continue to vision, but never bring anything into fruition. So we have collectively decided to finalize this year a 30-year economic development plan. We're calling it a state agenda, where we are incorporating elements around a set of sectors that came out of a development study of the Bronx that identified 7 areas of opportunity to build economic development that's indigenous to the Bronx, that's unique to the Bronx, that we can leverage to build shared wealth and ownership here in the Bronx. And so we're super excited about working with our sister organizations across the Bronx around that. So that was a lot. I will pause there and take any questions or comments. And again, I'll just share that we have our annual meeting on February 12th. It is in person. It's at the Talentine Gym, and it's at 5 o'clock. We will be doing rapid testing on site at 5 o'clock in order to have folks go inside. So it is an incentive if you want to get a rapid test. And that way we can really provide an additional level of safety for folks to participate. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Any questions to get us started? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I have several questions, as many as Margaret will permit. But thank you very much for that presentation, which was wonderful, really informative. I learned a great deal. Your organization name is the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition. But you made references to throughout the Bronx several times. So just if you could clarify for me, do you work throughout the entire Bronx, or do you try to limit your activities to a certain part of the Bronx?
That's a great question. Our name is definitely outdated, and we're in conversation now of changing our name in our future. We have been invited into different areas of the Bronx in order to support neighborhoods to address issues that are important to them. We are committed to not being in competition with any of our sister organizations. So when there is an organization that's organizing around a particular issue, we have no desire to go into that neighborhood other than to partner with them and support them. At the same time, we're a multi-issue organization, and so we organize around a lot of different issues. So an example I would want to share is that, for example, like a really good partner with us that organizes around housing is CASA, right? They organize around housing. We're not interested in organizing around housing in their catchment area. At the same time, we've been invited by faith-based institutions and labor institutions that are in that area to come and talk about our health work, because there's nobody in that neighborhood really organizing around health. And so we would see ourselves as going Bronx-wide and around our campaigns, as long as it is not in competition with another organization that is doing similar work. So we have actually expanded significantly in the East Bronx just because there's nobody in the East Bronx. So that's one of the areas that people have really been pushing for us to expand in.
Okay, thank you. This may be an extremely unfair question, but you cover so much territory: housing, education, healthcare, economic development. If you had to put something at the top of the list, based on what you've seen, the organizations you're working with, is there one number one priority that you could identify as the area of greatest need throughout the Bronx?
That is an unfair question, Bob. Just kidding. I would say housing. And when I say housing, I should actually say housing, land and land use. And the reason why I say that is because right before the pandemic happened, we saw trends, we were tracking trends in the Bronx that were mimicking what actually happened in Brooklyn in terms of gentrification. And because of the pandemic, much of that got paused. But if we as a borough and as a collection of organizations don't address land use and ensuring that the people who live here today can stay here, that all the other issues will kind of be, they become secondary if the people who live here can't stay here. And that, there's a variety of reasons why people may not be able to stay here, not just one reason, but that I think is like the foundation to ensure that people can stay and to then impact all the other issues.
And one last question, if Margaret will allow me. How, I'm tremendously impressed by the presentation. In what way could we best work with the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition? Where, if we were to decide, wow, this is an organization we really want to be more involved with, what would be the best way to do that?
That's a great question. I'm actually going to come look at you all. There you go. I would love if time permitted, either today or another time, just to understand, like, what are your priorities? Like, what are the issues that have come up that you're really worried about or concerned about? And I'd want to look at, like, where is there overlap for us to work together? We have worked with CB7 quite a bit and CB6, especially around land use. We have seen often developers come in, or even the EDC, to be quite frank, come in and make presentations about how something is going to be really, really great without a deep analysis of, like, what the implications are actually, right? And that's why we secure technical assistance partners, legal partners that help us unpack some of the issues that are presented to ensure that we are all on the same page and have the desire to protect and support residents that currently live here. And so I'd love to know from you all, like, what those issues are and concerns are. I will name that, we started as an organization that was really around, like, self-interest. So, like, whatever community members wanted to organize around, we would organize that. I would actually want to just, suggest a name that we have become a social justice organization. So, there might be an issue that people want to organize, but if it's not in line with our mission, then we won't pursue organizing around that issue. And so that is just something I think, we've learned from our own mistakes in the decades prior. And so for us, we're really clear that the issues that we organize around, it's not just what community wants, but it has to also reflect our values. And that I'd love to, explore that with you all and understand, where is their partnership that we can work together.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Camelia.
Do you hear me now? Oh yeah. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for being here. I've been attending this. I was just checking the minutes of this committee since we started it 2 years ago, and I was like, why aren't they here? Why aren't they here? And lo and behold, you're here. I'm so happy that this moment has come. Just to share with the other members, I'm familiar with the organization probably since 3 or 4 years ago. I actually even attended one of your annual meetings before COVID, the one that was at not Mount St. Vincent, at the college, at the Manhattan College. And just to tell everyone, it was such a vibrant event because between the faith groups and the local people and all the grassroots movement that the organization sort of brings together, it's truly one of the most sort of genuine social justice, land use focused organizations in our area. And again, thank you so much for being here and just for giving people an overview of everything. I mean, I will say the things that will make us all uncomfortable, as I often do. You are very focused on, of course, land use and the gentrification issue and the Kingsbridge Armory, and we had COVID, and so many people are displaced or their lives have been sort of uprooted, homelessness and all these things. You know, the community board 8 is clearly concerned with the aspect of social, racial equity. That's why we actually established this committee. And the whole topic of the day for everyone is shelters. Of course, we have a shelter coming up in the Broadway, North Riverdale area. I mean, this brings so many conflicting, you know, feelings, and it's an issue that is so difficult to approach, right? So I don't know. Well, I guess what I'm asking is kind of what's your organization's sort of philosophy about it, and how do you view the issue in the context, maybe because Community Board 8 is very diverse and also very geographically sort of, I don't know, you know, there are differences, right? But it's also very rich in the willingness to help and the willingness to embrace social causes, right? So that's my first question, sort of your thoughts about homelessness and the situation today in our area, Northwest Bronx. And the secondary question was the one you already touched upon, the future of the Kingsbridge Armory. I mean, it's kind of at the edge of our district, but I do believe it could potentially create a lot of economic activity. I'm also in the Economic Development Committee of the Community Board over there in an area that definitely needs job and cleanliness and small businesses, all that. For us, it's relevant as far as Marble Hill and that section that like it's very in the immediate proximity and could be a center of local economic development. So these two things, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on the homelessness and the armory. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Thank you, Camelia, for giving me such a tough question. I mean, this may not be popular, so I apologize. When we have seen fights around like, we don't want a shelter in our community, we actually think that's like not the right conversation to be having. The Bronx, for sure, I think we need to be really clear, has a saturation of shelters as opposed to any other borough in the city. So that is like something that we need to address and something that we need to like bring up to the city and to the state. Why does the poorest borough have, you know, the highest rates, the highest numbers of shelters? At the same time, we know that shelters are actually just temporary. They're Band-Aid solutions, and even homeless folks don't even like shelters, right? So the question becomes, how do we actually look at the housing system and understand like what is the transformation that needs to happen in order to ensure that people stay housed and that it's stable. And so the campaigns that we're organizing right now, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, we have the Housing Access Voucher Program, we have the Good Cause Eviction. All of these pieces of legislation are to ensure that tenants can stay in their homes. And the reason why folks end up homeless often is two main reasons. One is they cannot afford the rent. And the second is that there's some mental health issues going on. So we see that shelters are a Band-Aid situation. We're not actually getting to the root cause of either one of those. And so it saddens me because I don't believe, when folks say not in my backyard, I don't actually believe that they're against supporting homeless folks, right? But I do understand that there's an oversaturation in our community. For me, it's just, I think we're having the wrong conversation, that we should actually be fighting for addressing the root causes and not actually fighting about shelters that, is just a Band-Aid situation. So I'd love to talk more with you about that. Like we would not, so just to like name up front and be honest, we would not get involved in, we don't want a shelter in our community. We would not get involved in that. We don't believe in that. We would want to push the city to think about where it needs to be putting resources and investment, but not to say no to shelters. In terms of the Kingsbridge Armory, we know just from like the 26 years of organizing around the Kingsbridge Armory, we know that the Armory, in order to be successful, will need a very serious economic primary project in it, an economic engine that can support then an additional variety of other kinds of things in that building. If folks didn't know, the Kingsbridge Armory is the world's largest armory. The world's largest armory. So it's massive, and it needs a lot of investment for renovation and rehabilitation because the building is in very bad shape. And so for us, there's two main things that we're kind of pushing for with the Kingsbridge Armory this time around. There's a lot of learnings from the last time. The first one is that our community has already named that we want the land to be put in a community land trust. That land should belong to community and should negotiate with whatever happens inside. That's number one. And number two, that whatever goes inside, that we don't want an outside developer coming in that we have to negotiate to give our people benefits and health insurance and, good wages. We believe that whatever goes inside, that it can be a collective wealth building enterprise for community members themselves. So we're thinking about already what would a worker cooperative at scale look like around manufacturing in a building that would provide training, that would provide jobs, that would provide benefits, and could elevate the incomes of people in our community. That's how we keep people in their homes, is by giving them good jobs. And so that for us, I couldn't agree with you more. That's essential in what we need to do together.
Thanks. Just a very quick follow-up. Is EDC the owner of the land there and of the overall building? Who's the owner? Is the city?
The city is the owner
Through
of
EDC. Got it.
EDC is the
Thank you.
first holder.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Ramda?
Hey, Sandra, so great seeing you again.
Hi, good to see you.
It's always a pleasure working with you and Northwest. Obviously, my question is going to be geared towards education. So I know that advocacy is coming up, the plans. I was wondering what topics or things that the Northwest will be advocating for this coming year. And I know that mayoral control is up for a vote this year. I was wondering if the Northwest will be supportive or against mayoral control.
So I'm not going to answer that second question because we're engaging parents and young people right now around that. So I don't speak for them, they speak for themselves. And I think they still need to do some work around that. There's, we're looking at models across the country right now to understand the benefits and the costs of that. We see the benefits of having like a unified system in place, but the challenge is that then, there's no also creativity, innovation that is possible within different districts. And so we're still like in the midst of kind of understanding and learning, even from our own experience here in New York City with mayoral control. The issues that SBU, our youth program, Sisters and Brothers United, has been organizing around, has been around the school to prison pipeline. I mentioned that earlier. So there's some legislative intervention, and there's also a budgetary city level intervention, which is, I wasn't exaggerating. I can get you these numbers if you all would like to bring it to your education committee, but the city now, it's like a 9-to-1 ratio of spending more on police and metal detectors than on guidance counselors and social workers in schools, or even help like nurses. Like during the pandemic, when students went back to school, most schools don't even have nurses. And so for us, that's a travesty that is unacceptable. And so we're organizing to invest more money in restorative justice practices, invest in guidance counselors and social workers and health professionals in schools, and divest from the metal detectors and the school safety agents.
So sorry, can I just a follow-up, I guess a clarification. So the advocacy is kind of the same from last year when I worked with Crystal last year with SBU. So it's similar in terms of like looking at budgetary with the city council and a reinvestment model.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think there was a part where there was trying to move the SSA, school safety agents, from NYPD to the DOE. But then we saw last year that even though the SSAs were moved from NYPD to DOE, that the money also didn't transfer. So now the DOE is now footing the bill for SSAs, not the NYPD. I'm correct with that, right?
Yes, you are correct on that. Yeah. And what I'm not sharing, just because it's not finalized yet, is the state agenda that I mentioned earlier. There are additional pieces in the education platform that are new. So like an example is that SYEP, the Summer Youth Employment Program, should be a requirement, like that, like there should be enough jobs in the summer for every young person versus the current lottery program, which, you know, you have young people vying for a summer job. Like young people want to work, they want to you know, have that experience, and they want to contribute to their families. And right now that's a very small percentage. And part of the state agenda is that the state should be funding that so that every young person in the state who wants a job in the summer has a job. So I'm happy to share that with you when it's finalized. I'd also love for you all to contribute to that process too. So maybe I can stay in touch with Margaret to figure out a way that, you know, we can share that with all of you to come to some of the events and contribute. Amazing questions.
Go ahead, Julia. Julia, oh, okay, go ahead. Julia, you have your hand raised. Are you?
Sorry, I couldn't hear there for a second. Yeah, I just say that I'm, as the chair of the youth committee, you're welcome to come and talk with us about SYEP. It's something we've taken up a few times, and I'm sure the committee would love to support that initiative that every young person should have a place to work when they want to.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm on the housing committee. And I know that land use has sort of like thrown out open invitations to talk about issues relevant to, you know, worries or concerns that different parts of the district have about space and how it's being used and who has control over it. So I don't know if there's maybe Bob Bender, what do you think about making, we can talk about it afterwards, but, you know, I think I definitely would love to have you, Sandra, or maybe one of your colleagues come and speak to the housing committee, and I can follow up with the chair, just so that we can be more aligned. The committee itself has been very focused on NYCHA as of late. That the number of committee members live in one of the NYCHA buildings, and so that's been phenomenal. And the committee is also looking to have you know, more expansive conversation on some of the other deeply concerning housing issues that we're facing. So I'd love to, you know, keep connected with you. And one of the things, I guess, just broadly from the Special Committee on Racial Equity's perspective, is that we're trying to do a couple of different things. One is to elevate some of the ways in which standing committees within Community Board 8 have already been working on issues related to racial equity. All of the standing committees are taking on agenda items that are related to advancing equity. We're a part of this committee, and we want to be sure that the conversations are not kept in this committee, but that we're incorporating them across all of our standing committees. So those are a couple of priorities. And we're also looking to be sure that we're reaching every corner of the district and that we're being inclusive of all of the challenges that are going on in areas where perhaps people are very vocal and maybe perhaps people don't know how to access the community board, or they don't understand what it is or why it's useful or how they can make noise so that their corner of the world is getting attention too. So I guess from that standpoint, as well as recruiting community board members, which we want to ensure that we have diversity across the board in every aspect that you could think of, is there a way that we could also present to your organization or provide information about, I'm sure you all have shared information about the upcoming application process to become a community board member. But is there a way that we could also have, have that sort of two-way conversation, or you tell us what's appropriate?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be great for us to identify what those priorities are and then ways that we can have some synergy. I mean, we don't have a membership meeting in February because we have our annual meeting, but normally once a month we have a membership meeting, and then we break out into the different areas that I just mentioned. And so it is possible to then present to our membership around an issue, or vice versa, to have a conversation or a discussion, or even just host outside of that if that doesn't work, because those are in person, to host a different kind of conversation virtually that brings our work together in that way. I don't actually think I have, we talked about it actually last month, but I don't think I actually have the application. So it'd be great if if you could share that, Margaret. We did get folks on, we got 2 of our members on Community Board 7 a number of years ago, and 1 on CB6, but we haven't actually engaged CB8 a lot. So I was like really excited to connect with you all. So it'd be wonderful to, share more about us and learn more about what you all are doing and work together. That'd be great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I know I said it was going to be brief and it hasn't been, but this
No,
has
it's
been
great.
really been wonderful. And we have a lot of new ways to connect with you all. So thank you so much for your
Thank you
time.
so much.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank
Good
you.
night. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. That was super interesting, in my opinion. I wanted to just, while we have a quorum, get a quick vote on the December minutes, if someone could make a motion. Does anyone have any questions? Any issues?
I have a quick
concerns?
question, if I may, Margaret.
Sure.
Yes, you have a little table where you basically list the members and kind of areas of interest or areas where they could follow up on the square reflection within those committees. For some reason, there is a cross on me on public safety, but I'm not a member of public safety, but I am on economic development, which I fully take on.
Okay.
So I just didn't know whether like you intended it elsewhere or whatever. I don't know. But
Oh,
just wanted to
maybe I was thinking, I was like switching them in my brain. Okay, I'll fix that. Thank you.
Hey, Margaret.
Hi.
So just want to make a motion to approve the minutes with Camelia's I guess corrections.
typo. Seconding.
Thank you. Quickly, while we're on it, I did make this sweeping announcement last night that all of the standing committees had members of SCREE on them, and then Deb Travis was like, "You don't have anyone on traffic and transportation." And I do recall that we have that gap, which I know is a massive commitment. Go ahead, committee.
Not formally a member of TNT, but I don't think I skip many meetings, and I also bring to them screen related issues. So if nobody else is a formal member that would like to take on the task, I'm happy to be the backup person.
Great. And, I'd love to also have a conversation with perhaps the 3 of us or the 2 of you can just have a conversation, well, it sounds like you've already brought some agenda items to TNT. Anything that's top of mind right now that you would emphasize as it relates to racial equity coming before that committee?
Nothing immediately, but we did discuss the fact that most of the concerns being brought to the attention of TNT are in one particular area of CB8, and we need to expand our reach to the areas that do not bring so many traffic related concerns. So that was kind of the conversation with Deb, and she's doing a tremendous job though at reaching out, and her meetings are really, really well attended. I do think that we have to focus a little bit more on the areas that are unheard, basically. Still, yeah.
Well, she knows how I feel about step streets in the Kingsbridge area. So again, I'm going to etch my initials into a step street at some point once we get that. I won't, but you know what I'm saying. I feel like I'm the squeaky wheel on that. I'm sure I'm not the only one. People have been doing it for probably decades longer than I have. Well, thank you for that. And so should we just move you over? I mean, if she accepts or you'll be a frequent participant of TNT, that's okay?
Absolutely on mind. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Margaret, we haven't actually voted to approve the minutes yet.
Sorry.
Just
Thank you,
wanted to bring
Bob.
that up.
Any all in favor? Any abstentions? Any opposed? Great. Okay, Camellia's TNT. All right, so I did want to ask about, so I did get clarity last night, I think, from the budget committee that SCREE may not make a recommendation on budget asks. And I think that's the final answer on it. But Bob, do you have anything else, or you just, that's basically the answer that we have?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that as a special committee, we cannot ourselves submit budget requests, whether for capital or for expense. However, as we've been discussing, we have very good representation on all the standing committees. Not perfect, but very good. And I think our most effective way to make sure that equity issues are addressed in the budget requests is to do it through the process that's going on right now, which is that in each of the committees, we're drawing up our priorities, you know, with this meeting and the next meeting, and then we're going to vote on them in April. And so, you know, I think what we really want to do is, as we address these budget priorities, make sure that equity is on the table as a consideration for the prioritization of the items that the individual committees approve. So that's how I see our functioning within the system right now.
That makes a lot of sense. Do folks want to talk anymore about specific issues or maybe recommended budget asks or anything like that that's going to come before committees? I don't want to spend a lot of time if like on this at all. I wasn't necessarily expecting to talk through specific ideas, but in the event that you are curious or you're wondering if it's something that you should move forward, or if it's something that you could use some, I don't know, additional people to support. I guess I was just curious about that. But if not, you'll all take it to your respective committees, and that makes a lot of sense.
Margaret, I had my hand up.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Budgeting is really core to the reason for this committee's existence. So let's put some time into last year's budget. That was one of our plans to begin with. And let's figure out the EJ clusters in the budget asks and those that can be considered equity. Laura did that herself last year. It's a really important thing. And I think a really important thing to bring to an executive committee is an analysis of where we differed from year to year. So it's really important. The second thing I think is, I don't think the board adopts frameworks for evaluation of budget priorities. It doesn't adopt an overarching goal, whether it be EJ or whether it be equity or whether it be, you know, flood mitigation. And a lot of it is selection, you know, and trading, as we all know, in the executive committee and then in the full board meeting, the public hearings. So it might be worth really, Margaret, bringing up that option for people, but certainly first to bring up a report of year to year how these budget asks serve our most vulnerable census tracts and neighborhoods.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, anything else on budget items? So Bob, were you just saying that Laura might have done some look at
Laura-
previous years, or did you mean that she had just done some reflection on equity in last year's budget?
Well, Laura
proposals?
wanted to make sure we were being fair to the community, and she reported to the exec at one point that things looked pretty equal, right? But we were called into being to do that kind of assessment. So
Mhm.
that's definitely one of the core functions of a community board, and but I think we should take that job up, and let the board know they need that reflection, because they don't do that analysis we're supposed to.
Okay. Got it.
Margaret, if I may.
Sure.
Well, what I always do is I look at every committee and we go over the capital and expense. And we look and see where in the district this need is going to be used. And I've always been very impressed with how across the board and across the district these requests have been. Whether it's Parks Department, where our number one, is the Bailey Avenue Playground, where, we're looking at every corner of the district. And a lot of our things are, say, parks maintenance for every park. And for, so they're district wide, but specifically, I looked at the capital and expense budgets for the past 2 years and broken down statistically, it's really all over. It's more in the not Riverdale area, to tell you the truth, because there's more needs in the other areas. So whether we're asking for a light or whether we're asking for a traffic guard for PS 95, or where we're looking, whether it's public safety or whatever library, whatever school, the schools were all over the improvements for the schools. So I it's important that we look at that, and we'll continue to look at that and look at the agendas. I think I sent you, because I felt it could be, a real link. I sent you the Health and Hospitals agenda, which is coming up, is going to be on COVID and youth. And he has someone coming in, guests, and to talk about that. So I think that our agendas are very varied, and that's what we strive for.
Yeah, and I've gone through all of our agendas since, I don't know, it's been the last several years, at least 2019, and pulling things from the agendas to add to the list of activities and things like that. So maybe it's worth, like Bob's saying, I could do a version of what I did with the activities and make it a budget version, basically. So I don't know how that would look, but anyway.
But we're
probably a
doing
much
it, and
smarter
the
way of
officers,
doing it.
are doing it. We're looking at that. Yeah,
Okay, great.
as we should
Camelia-
be.
Yeah, I'm with you. Camelia, did you have your hand raised, or that was from before?
Did, but just now that you acknowledge me, just to point out, I wasn't aware that as a special committee, we cannot put forward budget request, and I'm not taking any side on either way, but just it's something to take into consideration, whether through the evolution of the committee itself, we may want to consider, and I think this was raised before, becoming or seriously contemplating becoming a standing committee, because then all of a sudden, you're at an equal level bargaining amongst committees on priorities. So just wanted to underscore this, if that point will become indeed something we wanted to pursue at some point. That's all I wanted to say.
May I say something? I'm sorry, it's Laura again. The reason it's set up this way is because the standing committees work specifically with an agency, specifically. And we're all about, with the expense budget and the capital budget, delivery of city services. So as you know, ENS is DEP, traffic has DOT, health and hospitals, they have the Department of Health, et cetera, et cetera. We are aligned that way. Economic Development, SBS. That is why when you have something that your committee feels is important and goes to the standing committee, that request goes to the agency and goes through OMB and you know what I mean? So this special committee is not aligned with one of those delivery service city agencies. That's why it's really doesn't matter whether it's standing committee or special committee. It's how it's the link with the agencies that we deal with, that and those agencies give us advice. We go to them. What do you need? Where do you need this? The security cameras. We go to the police. So that's why they're set up for that.
Okay.
So it's not power. It's not about power. It's just about form and function. I hope that
Okay.
explains it.
Thanks. All right, so I did want to go back to our screen report before the evening gets too late. So I shared the current version that includes an updated executive summary and the cover page and some small edits on just ensuring that we're using Hispanic across the board, because that's where our data, those are the terms that the data later on in the report use. And then nothing else has been touched. So the executive summary was something that Jill put together, and it was sent to the committee probably about 6-7 months ago. So I wanted to send that so that it looks comprehensive. And I know that we've talked a few times about, well, one, I just wanted to use this as a point to reflect on some of the recommendations that we've made. From my take on things, there's a number of recommendations that are moving forward. They're in progress. And there are some that we've put on hold. And then there are others that are sort of unknown. And so I wanted to look at some of the unknowns and those on hold, and just affirm where we are, or perhaps come up with some action steps that potentially, we can make a decision of how we want to move forward. So just jump in because I'm looking at my agenda and I'm also looking at the camera. So please just jump in if you have a question or a comment. So one, provide research on topics to advance racial equity component of discussion. That's something that I believe was for standing committees. I don't believe that this is, maybe this is something sort of like in the future, all of a sudden we have all of these topics. I don't think any of us necessarily have the research capability to provide content for standing committee discussions. So in my opinion, one, I don't think that this has ever been done in the time that I've been on screen. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's a huge task to undertake. I know that Ramdat's been working on census tracts and data, and it's massive. But does anyone feel as though we should dig in deeper on this, or perhaps we need to clarify it for ourselves? And what do we really mean when we're talking about, providing research on topics? I think we do try to provide different perspectives, but just wanted to ask for your thoughts on that, and if we need to apply any sort of time and effort to that recommendation.
Margaret,
Mhm.
I'm not, I just wanted to say a couple of things in that regard. That the research is, as I discovered, is really a major piece of work. There are a lot more census tracts in Community Board 8 than I ever imagined there were. So going through all that data is time consuming. And, you know, I'm delighted that Ramdot wants to take a crack at it. I would offer to help to the extent that I can, but I've discovered that my ambition outweighs my ability. But I do think having that data would be really helpful to us. Knowing the community board district intimately in terms of everything from race to economic, disparity to health outcomes and so on. So, it's a valuable contribution. The other thing that you included in that same item about the research was the question of enshrining this process in bylaws and the ethical guidance manual. I don't think we want to get too deep into that subject in terms of bylaws and the ethical guidance manual, but what I think we really could be doing and should be doing is to raise the issue of equity, of economic justice, racial equity, and so on in the ethical guidance manual. I think that's an appropriate place to make this something that really ought to be part of what we do in the course of everything that we do on the community board. That would be an issue that would have to go before LRE, because that's how the ethical guidance manual is changed. But I think incorporating equity issues into the very essence of what we do in the community board is really quite fundamental and quite important, and something that we should be advocating for.
Thank you, Bob. I just wanted to emphasize that there are recommendations that are moving forward that Bob picked up on, that the all standing committees take on initiatives that address racial equity, that SCREE members attend standing committees to share research, gather information, to advance discussion on racial equity. So those things, are a part of this bigger piece that Bob is referring to. So I just want to say that we have been moving forward on those fronts. And I think your recommendation on including equity in the ethical guidance memo is very useful. And I think LRE is also another one of those committees where we don't have a presence. There's two committees. Now TNT is addressed. I think LRE is something that I was getting involved into. So if I need to, I will. But that's a great point. Any other comments on this? Okay. The other part of enshrining this process in the bylaws and ethical guidance manual is also a part of, and maybe this is what you're saying, Bob, but to include the process of SCREE being and sort of being a member to at least intentionally to advance the conversation on equity at each of the standing committees, or however we choose to frame it. But is that something that would also be included within the ethical guidance manual, that there would be this sort of standing committee and that standing committee members would sort of help, that each SCREE member would be helping standing committees talk about various issues related to equity?
Well, I didn't want to get into the mechanism for how we do this, or make a specific recommendation. It's really more of a goal than a method that I was referring to. I think that equity issues ought to be fundamental to what we do as a community board. Now that would seem to me to imply that it ought to be fundamental to what each standing committee does. But, but I think that's where we state what the goal is, and the implementation, I think, is really up to, it's up to the officers and the committee chairs in particular to implement the goals of the community board. So as I say, I want to articulate what we're aiming for, but not really specify the method to get there. That's my own point of view.
Margaret?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it would be ill-advised to present committee members of this committee as tutors for the rest of the board to help them reach equity goals by formalizing some kind of relationship like that. So no, I don't think we should prescribe how we interact.
I mean, it's just the way that it works now. There's
Yeah.
no tutoring or anything like that. It's just how it is now. Do we want to formalize it?
Well, I think what we know, the other thing I would do is to define the research, okay? What happened tonight is a great example of an organization that came to a committee that does not have an agency report, as Laura says. And so we kind of found a scene. I can clearly see this coming to youth committee, obviously, for DYCD issues and SYEP issues. But outside that, there may not have been another committee to host Northwest Bronx. So what because we have found this scene where we don't report to an agency, but we are in tune with equity-minded organizations throughout the Bronx, we need to bring to attention the work of this to other committees. So we really need to promote this as a resource for multiple committees that could work with the speaker tonight. That's what I guess what I mean by research. It would mean resources. And this organization provides a great resource for their own invitation. So not that we would say you need to talk to Northwest Bronx co-elected to do your business, but we had a great meeting. We had a one-of-a-kind presentation that hasn't been done to Community Board 8 before. And so some changes should be made based on what SCREE presents to the board, and maybe there'll be more committee outreach.
Okay. Anything else on this point? Right, compile a list of equity-focused, community-oriented, faith-based organizations that are interested in engaging this work. That's something that at least the community organizations, we have the list from the office, and I guess there's a bit of I guess finding out who's interested in this work. I guess we would have to have a broader net and be able to engage some of these organizations in a broad way so that we could understand, not every single organization is going to be able to present one-on-one, but where are the ways in which we want to sort of like work with groups of organizations, or perhaps there are member organizations or ones like we spoke with tonight. But that I would say is sort of in progress. I think that needs some work though.
I think that's a great opportunity because a lot of times people fall back on agencies or organizations they're familiar with. And I think that's a great inventory of what's out there. And a lot of time what happens with reproducing marginalization is you just didn't realize that people were out there and we needed. So when you're conscious and purposeful and see who have we heard from lately, has anybody heard, that would be a really nice agenda item to go over that list and see who are we in touch with, who aren't we. Maybe Margaret, maybe you don't want to do it at a meeting, but I think it's a great wake up call for us or for anybody just to see who's in our loop, who haven't we heard from, does anybody know how this organization is doing in the midst of COVID, that kind of thing. And a lot of times they wouldn't get a formal invitation because maybe they can't get it, they don't have business to present or advocate for the community. But we know who they are, and it would be just nice to know the lights we heard from them, and if anybody has any contacts.
Okay, thank you. Any other points?
Hey, Margaret. Sorry, y'all. I have to hop off to go tutor a student. But it's like
That happens every meeting. I have to say, it's getting a little old. We're
no,
on to you.
it's
We're on to you. I'm teasing.
I know.
Go do your
but
job.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna still work on the census stuff. I do have some, like, I'm putting together a document, which I will share with you all as well, to be able to show like some of the census tracts, and I'm trying to make it visually as well, not just a lot of writing. So that's why it's taking me a while to compile. But I'll definitely get that to you soon.
Awesome, thank you, Ramdat. We'll look to maybe talk about it at the March meeting, and you can let me know. We can touch base ahead of time if that makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
All right, thanks,
Take
you
care.
too.
Good night.
Can I quickly jump in,
Mhm.
Margaret? Yeah, just to add, I mean, I'm happy that Ramdat is working on his numbers and trying to make them a little bit more visually interactive, because I think this is something going back to our sort of product on our hands, the report. This is something maybe we could like improve a little bit. But anyway, let me not get distracted. What
Yeah.
I wanted to say, yeah, with some technicalities here. No, number one, let's ensure that the community board website lists the current membership. Let's ensure the community of the committee. Let's ensure the current website lists the report in its most advanced form, which is what you sent, Margaret, because it kind of looks uncomfortable because now it says December 2020 on the document that is downloading from the website. But I think we have a little bit of a later one. I love the pictures on the cover and all that. You may want to consider as a simple immediate step, since Jill resigned, to the extent you want to use her executive summary, to do your own executive summary, because you are now the chair, and how to say, that leadership has to be reflected because it's heavy and it's appreciated. I don't know, I'm just putting things out there, right? And then just in terms of giving us the discussion prior in terms of relationship with committees, I thought was very valuable, because I think that document that lists each committee and the actions they took, that should be reflected in the report, because that report is open to the public and the public should see how each committee of CB8 has dealt with the issues of equity. So that should be either an annex to the current version, or how it's a link. Yes, I know. I'm just saying maybe you want to make it explicit, because that shows real work to conceptualize our concern into the work of functional committees. And then finally, I'm just putting it out there because this may kind of help us. It helps me at least when I know how the product should look like. I know the process that has to take me to the product. I'm thinking this report, it's out there now. It is in its first version from December 2020. I mean, parts of these reports will always be relevant, right? Like the demographic compositions, or the role of community boards, all these things. But parts of this report will vary from year to year. Specifically, the actions that various committees are doing, things we may want to highlight in 1 year. I don't know, there's an issue of, I don't know, women related things or transportation or EJ or whatever issue. So I think it would be useful in our next iteration when we deal with the actual report to figure out which are the parts that, at the end of the year, we want to present to the board. At the end of the year, we would have the set of things that committees worked on and a particular highlight or two. So the report will always be there as a frame with a fixed piece that will always be the same, like every census every 10 years, and some variable mobile parts that we as a committee we would work on. And essentially we would have to just review those variable parts at the end of a year of the committee's work. I'm just kind of putting it out there as a potential way to address this. We do have to address this report in one way or another and have it say something other than December 2020. So just kind of wanted to put a couple of things out there to take it further.
Okay, so can we just hold on to some of those things really quickly? Because I just want to say that the interim report, I just want to hang on, put a pin in that for a real quick second. The public forum is indefinitely on hold. Meetings in various parts of the district are indefinitely on hold. Considering racial equity as a standing committee is also on hold. The two things that I just want to address before we get into some of the pieces on the report is one, training and ongoing discussion with board members and staff on unconscious bias, structural racism. I don't know where that stands. We obviously have a new borough president who sort of sets a lot of the guidelines. But Laura, do you know if this is something that we've, obviously we've been living through COVID as well, but is this something that you have heard that is advancing, or who should we talk to about it?
I have not heard. You recall when we all heard that there was going to be some kind of training coming from the BP, but since that announcement, I haven't heard anything.
Okay,
I can ask about it.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, obviously, we have the upcoming applications for either renewals for board members or for new candidates to the community board. And so I want to come back to that, but that's, you know, a really important part of some of our action steps. Okay, so the interim report, or so the report itself, before we get to the interim. We've talked a lot about report edits, what to update, to what end. You know, we have some feedback on demographics, analysis. Should we include any analysis? I think demographics, to your point, Camelia, can be fixed. They're always, you know, changing for the most part too. Is this something that we want to just keep as sort of like, this was a snapshot in time of when we launched this SCREE and when we created this report. And now, like Camelia, all the suggestions you made of like layering interim reports on top of it, that keeps a current list of committee activities, as well as maybe highlights that took place throughout the year, or maybe things that happened in the world that sort of catalyzed or sparked some action at the community board level. So I just wanted to hear from you all. And then the third piece on feedback that I saw in reviewing all of this all over again was about like structure. Should we move things around? What's the tone? All those sorts of things. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this. I believe, you know, we have something for us to move forward with. It's an imperfect document since it wasn't able to be like a thesis of any of ours, but I do consider it as a snapshot in time. And so I wanted to hear from you also that we could sort of either create a list of action items with people to do it, or put some of the revisions to bed for now. Any thoughts that you might have on iterations, edits, and interim reports? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, as Camelia said, you know, certain elements of the report won't change, you know, that have to do with the nature of the community board and our responsibilities and so on. I think the demographics based on the 2020 census, that's very valuable information. It will change over time, but it won't change. It won't change substantially from one year to another. Gradually, it will change. So that's, you know, that's something that has some lasting value certainly for the next several years. Beyond that, honestly, Margaret, I need to go back and reread the report, which I did not get to do before tonight's meeting. I just couldn't get to it. And I think, that would be a good thing for all of us to do. One of the things we could do, I mean, just to address Camillea's point about the date, I don't know that we need to date the report. I mean, this is the SCREE report as it is at this time. It will evolve a little bit. It will change. Next year we'll have more input from community-based organizations. Things will happen that none of us can foresee, and we'll decide we want to address them in some way or other. If putting a date on it limits it or makes it seem outdated, I'd rather not have a date at all, because the job of this committee is to keep thinking about these issues, and as necessary to keep updating them. So, but to go beyond what I've said already would really require a rereading of the report, and that's something I'm going to do before the March meeting. So for now, those are my thoughts for what they're worth.
I also spoke with someone earlier who suggested that we take, however we revise our recommendations, if at all, or add on to our recommendations, that we use a SMART goal format so that it doesn't become too lofty or too specific, but that we make it very straightforward for everyone. And we could use that as part of an interim report if we chose to do so. Being focused on annual goals so that they can be transparent and, of course, accountable.
I'm not familiar with the term SMART goals. Is that, can you just explain that?
Sure, it's an acronym, so it's specific, measurable, accountable. I'm gonna miss the R and the T.
Achievable,
Yeah,
relevant, and
Time-based.
time-bound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
have
it's-
heard that. I never heard the
Yeah.
acronym. Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? Are we satisfied with the report as it is, and whether, or we want to come back to it? You all want to take some more time? I would, if you all take some time to read the report, I would also ask that you give some time to the recommendation section. Are there ones that we just want to, we've evolved from them, we no longer think they're relevant? Do we want to add specific goals? And maybe that's something that we set, as we're speaking with organizations to help us clarify what our goals are.
Can I add something as someone who contributed nothing to the creation of this document?
Of course.
I remember with all due respect, the hours it felt like of discussion about the report once it was produced. And I know that this committee worked incredibly hard on it. So I think if you are going to do any kind of revision, or we are, I guess now, it really is a little bit more targeted, and the feedback if feedback is asked for, is a little bit more targeted. Like, I remember lots of talk about the tone, and the tone didn't match. Well, there were 7 different authors. That's why the tone didn't match. And unless you're going to hire an editor, I don't know that feedback, while, accurate, but not, I don't know that was the most important part of this report, or the part that was really trying to be conveyed. And to kind of get the most productive feedback, maybe just kind of say, okay, we did X, Y, and Z. Number 1 is open for feedback, and that we're not going back to December and rehashing all of this again, so people can bring up their concerns that may or may not have gotten addressed.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just say, like we did sort of similarly at the end of the report, if there are material changes to be made, I think we should consider those, but sort of in aesthetics or in tone or structure, I just don't think it's a good use of time for us. And I would like to get to work on a lot of the recommendations that we have. So I would just say, like, as you're reviewing the report again, please really review the recommendations, consider those that we could add on to what we have. And really, whatever we choose to keep that is not already in progress, something that's unknown or that I shared with the committee, please give any clarity that we need on some of those recommendations, and or let's just say, like, we no longer think they're relevant, or we no longer feel as though they should be part of some of our goals that we're working on for the year, or whatever it is, so that we can get concrete about what it is that we're doing next. Any last pieces on the report? Okay, so Ramdot is going to give us more information at the next meeting in March. I also wanted to underscore that for the committee list, which will also be updated, I've extended the deadline multiple times for standing committee members to give their input on the activities. So last night I did give sort of one last shot to committee chairs. I have not heard from budget, education, health and hospitals, housing, land use, law, rules and ethics, and public safety. So I asked them for one last round. We have been updating this list annually. This is our second update. So we will have more time for people to edit. But I just wanted to let you know that I have tried to ask for, feedback from multiple people who are connected with committees. So that is that. And I feel like I'm missing something, but I've looked at the agenda. I don't have anything else to say, but is there anything else that you all would like to address tonight?
Yeah, one more thing, Margaret, just to follow up on what you just said. What about sending an email to the board office specifying the committees that you're still hoping to hear from, and indicating what you would like them to say in response, and ask the board office to send this out to the chairs of those committees that you just mentioned. I think sending an email to the chairs of each of those committees saying, we really hope to hear from you about X, Y, and Z would really be great. I think, that way everybody knows exactly what you're asking. Does that sound reasonable?
All right, this is their fourth and last notice.
I know, I understand. It's not
Margaret?
easy.
Margaret, that was one of the things I wanted to chat with you about tomorrow. That was
Okay.
on my list. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
Margaret, before
Yeah.
we can end the meeting, I just want to invite you to our next DNS meeting.
Sorry, Bob, I can't hear you.
Sorry. I wanted to invite people to our next DNS meeting, as we'll be doing our budgeting around environmental justice neighborhoods as a framework, and also flood mitigation, flood vulnerable communities impacted recently by Ida. So we're adopting that equity framework as we did last year, again, for budgeting. And so I invite everybody here to see how we could actually use equity as for assessing needs and committee priorities. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Last thing I'll say is, sort of inspired by Bob Fanuzzi's recommendation on a framework for evaluating budget priorities. I think it would also be interesting to get feedback from organizations like Northwest Bronx, which presented tonight, areas that they think the community board can be taking action in. So maybe that's
a
something
great
that
idea.
we want to use as sort of a framework for ourselves. Do we have a standard 5 questions that we want organizations to be prepared to come in to,
Hmm.
be candid with us and share their thoughts?
It's a good one, Margaret.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. Thank you all very much. I will send out follow-up minutes and with action steps. So thank you all very much. Have a great night. And talk
Thank
to
you.
soon. Bye.
Everybody
Bye,
stay
Margaret.
well.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.